I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. The MAGA fascist named Steve Bannon is, just like his cult leader, not paying his legal bills, just stiffing people on bills. That's one of the MAGA qualities here. Yet lawyers continue to represent these MAGA leaders, and vendors continue to do business with them even though they are not paid for their services. Specifically, we're learning, based on a new article that was published in the Daily Beast earlier in the day, that attorneys Evan Corcoran, Robert Costello, David Schoen, and John Mitchell, each who have represented Bannon in different proceedings, may not have been getting paid the money that they're owed for providing legal services. Only David Schoen went on the record and said that he has been paid, but it's likely that the other lawyers have not been paid for their services. So Bannon's been involved in a number of criminal proceedings filed against him. One of the earlier proceedings was a federal criminal case for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, as well as money laundering, based on Bannon's involvement in a GoFundMe scheme for the We Build the Wall fundraiser, where private money was purportedly raised to help build the wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for. But rather than that money going to the wall, it went to enrich Steve Bannon and others associated with this supposed charity. The feds brought charges in 2020. Robert Costello, New York lawyer, represented Bannon throughout those proceedings and ultimately secured a pardon for Bannon. I'll tell you more about the pardon in a little bit, just to remind you of that, but Trump pardoned Steve Bannon from these conspiracy to commit wire fraud charges and money laundering charge that the feds were pursuing. So that's the first case, and Costello has not been paid for his legal services to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars there. The next matter, criminal matter, that Costello was also on was Steve Bannon being charged with contempt of Congress back in November of 2021. He had a summer 2022 criminal trial. He was represented in that case by Costello, and specifically Costello was involved in a lot of the pre-filing work before the Department of Justice filed the contempt of Congress charges against Bannon. Costello was involved there. Then Costello was part of a legal team of Evan Corcoran and David Schoen, who represented Bannon in the criminal case brought by the Department of Justice. Bannon was convicted on the 2 counts of contempt of Congress for not turning over records, as well as not showing up for a deposition. Bannon was ultimately sentenced to 3 to 4 months in prison. He's currently appealing that ruling. That will work its way through the appeal process. Even if Bannon succeeds in the appeal there, it would just lead ultimately to a new trial there. And Robert Costello, again, who has not been paid for his legal services to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, would purportedly, leave his home from Long Island to go to Washington, D.C. for the trial and for all of these pre-filing meetings with the Department of Justice. And Costello found himself in hot water in connection with his representation of Bannon, where the feds zeroed in on Costello's conduct in potentially obstructing the congressional investigation, and they started looking into Costello's behavior. One of the things in the contempt of Congress case, and what Bannon is actually specifically appealing on, the grounds for appeal, is basically an argument throwing his lawyers under the bus. And so Bannon's argument that he wasn't able to make in the district court proceedings before the jury in Washington, D.C., it's Judge Carl Nichols was the judge, was a advice of counsel defense. In other words, he said, I was given incorrect information by my lawyers that I did not have to show up before the January 6th committee, and that's why I didn't show up, because my lawyers gave me that advice. And as part of the standard for contempt of Congress, I should be able to show an intent element, that I didn't have the mental state or intent to not show up, but that I was simply following the advice of my lawyers erroneously, and but for that advice, I would have showed up. So that is what is being appealed. And I'm not going to get into this video the very technical aspect of Bannon's appeal, but suffice to say, there was a case from 40 or 50 years ago, a contempt of Congress case involving a mobster. It was called United States versus Licavoli, and that is the precedent controlling in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals regarding not being able to utilize advice of counsel defenses in contempt of Congress cases. But one of the things that Bannons argued is that the law has evolved, and similar statutes allow an advice of counsel defense. So here, with this contempt of Congress charge being prosecuted, he should be able to throw his lawyers under the bus and say it was their fault and present that type of evidence to a jury. So that's Bannon's defense, again, throwing his lawyers under the bus. And then finally, the current case that Bannon's involved in as well is the state version of the conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and money laundering charges. Well, Bannon ultimately received a pardon by Donald Trump. A federal pardon by the President of the United States does not foreclose state from bringing state charges, not federal charges, but state criminal charges. So New York charged Bannon with the same felonies and additional felonies for violations of state law for his participation in the We Build the Wall scam, scamming this GoFundMe money that people believed were going to the wall to enrich himself. And one passing note I make with this stealing of GoFundMe money also has a little bit of George Santos vibes to it as well. Remember George Santos, the MAGA Republican, who builds himself in the image of what it means to be a MAGA Republican today, created fake GoFundMe accounts to engage in predatory behavior where he preyed on disabled, homeless military veterans and promised them with the GoFundMe account that he would help provide medical services to their dying pets. And so in this one specific example, he promised this military veteran, disabled and homeless, that he would get this tumor removed from this pit bull mix that was a dog, that the life companion of this disabled homeless military veteran named Ostaf. And then after George Santos actually raised the money, rather than provide it to a veterinarian to remove the tumor, Santos kept it, yelled and screamed at the homeless military veteran, called him needy and all these horrible things, and then stole the money for himself. That's being criminally investigated by the feds, but this is just who MAGA is right now. But going back to the New York prosecution, that's right now before a New York judge, Justice Juan Merchan, and proceedings are taking place there. Trial hasn't been set there, but you may recall that last month, Bannon's lawyers went into court there. One of his lawyers is David Schoen. Another of his lawyer is John Mitchell. And those lawyers told the Justice Juan Merchan, the judge, that they have had a complete, quote, communications breakdown with Biden. They sought to withdraw from the case. And Justice Juan Merchan said, look, if Bannon substitutes a new lawyer in, we'll let you be removed from the case, but we're not going to let you be removed from the case until Bannon finds a new lawyer. But they talked about this communications breakdown with Steve Bannon over there. So those are the various cases that are taking place. Going back to the pardon that Steve Bannon was given, here's the part from the federal judge's order. Back on May 25th, 2021, when District Judge Torres had to dismiss this case involving Bannon because Trump gave Bannon the pardon before Donald Trump left office, District Court Judge wanted the world to know. By the way, the pardon was issued on January 19th of 2021. The district court judge wanted to know the world to know that Bannon was guilty and that the pardon implied Bannon's guilt. And this is specifically how the federal judge made this ruling, saying, I have to grant the dismissal now because Trump gave Bannon this pardon, but I want to be very clear. Goes, This is what the judge says. Of course, a pardon does not standing alone render a defendant innocent of the alleged violation, nor does a pardon before conviction blot out probable cause of guilt or expunge indictment. To the contrary, from the country's earliest days, courts, including the Supreme Court, have acknowledged that even if there is no formal admission of guilt, the issuance of a pardon may carry an imputation of guilt, acceptance, and a confession of it. Goes on to say, for instance, in 1833, Chief Justice John Marshall wrote that a pardon is an act of grace proceeding from the power entrusted with the execution of the laws, which exempts the individual on whom it is bestowed from the punishment the law inflicts for a crime he has committed. 20 years later, the New Jersey Supreme Court noted, pardon implies guilt. If there be no guilt, there is no ground for forgiveness. It is an appeal to executive clemency. It is asked as a matter of favor to the guilty. It is granted not of right, but of grace. A party is acquitted on the ground of innocence. He is pardoned through favor. And upon this very ground, it is the pardoning power is never vested in a judge. This venerable principle remains true in the 21st century. Acceptance of a pardon may imply a confession of guilt. So you have all of these lawyers, Corcoran, Robert Costello, David Schoen, John Mitchell, doing all this work for Bannon. Ostensibly, Bannon is a wealthy person. He's funded by a Chinese billionaire. Think about that for all of the MAGA Republican conspiracies. Oh, Chinese funded. Donald Trump has Chinese bank accounts. Donald Trump pays more money to China in taxes than the United States. Bannon is bankrolled by a Chinese billionaire. That's who pays for Bannon to go on and spread all of this election disinformation, just funded by a Chinese billionaire who wants to harm the United States of America. All of these lawyers did all of this work for Bannon. By the way, when Bannon was arrested by the feds in 2020 for the We Build the Wall scam, he was arrested while he was getting off the yacht of the Chinese billionaire. Just put that in perspective. So all these lawyers doing all the work, Bannon's very wealthy, and these lawyers are owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. David Schoen claims that he was paid. None of the other lawyers went on the record and saying they were paid. And they've done a lot of work. They've been thrown under the bus by Bannon. And that just goes to show you how MAGA treats everyone. It's not unique to lawyers. It's their vendors. They don't pay the vendors. They don't pay people who do work for them. They run things horribly. They don't pay their bills. They engage in abusive process of the judicial process. It is utterly contemptible. It is utterly despicable. But here's just another example of that. With all of those cases, all of these people sacrificing their jobs. Why? Stupidity. But this is what they get. You know, I said MAGA means make attorneys get attorneys. Someone corrected me in the comments. They said, how about this, Ben? MAGA stands for make attorneys get arrested. I go, wow, that's way better than make attorneys get attorneys. I like make attorneys get arrested so much better, but that's it. You want to talk about the Alina Habas and the Giulianis and the Sidney Powells and the John Eastmans. And now these lawyers, where do they end up? Where do they end up? Never in a good place. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your incredible support. So hit the subscribe button right now. Also, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. You will love the exclusive content we have on our Patreon, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. So check it out there. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas, and check out Killing County, currently on Hulu, which I executive produced with Colin Kaepernick, about the crime, corruption, and cover-up that takes place in Bakersfield, Kevin McCarthy's district. I'm Ben Meiselas. Thanks for watching.
The best part of waking up? MAGA Tears in my cup. Check out the new MAGA Tears mug, available now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com. It's 100% union made right here in the USA. I know I'm not tired of winning yet. How about you? Get yours today.